Good evening to each of you who are joining us tonight in your cars for the first ever MLK Weekend Drive-In Saturday Night program. I am Sean Brevard, current chairperson of Committee for King. It is my honor to welcome you this evening to the first of 3 weekend events that honor the life and legacy of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. I don't need to tell you that 2020 has been a year of disruption and seismic change. While we live in small-town Northeast Mississippi, none of us are immune from the effect of the global pandemic, the divisive nature of the recent presidential campaign, civic unrest tied to the gut-wrenching deaths of George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, and so many others in the African American community. Climate change that has caused some of the worst natural disasters in our lifetime, and so on. As I record this welcome address just prior to Christmas 2020, I acknowledge that the program will be aired just 4 days before the inauguration of our incoming president, Joe Biden. The COVID-19 vaccine has just been administered to local healthcare workers the day before we filmed, so the second dose should have been administered to them by now. The new year has dawned with fresh promise and ongoing challenges. As our mentor and inspiration, Dr. King, said in February of 1968, quote, "We must accept finite disappointment, but never lose ultimate hope." Tonight's program is certainly one of hope, of unity, of love. We will pray together, sing, recognize local community members who have brought so much good for the benefit of others, and hear a message of meaning and discernment from our keynote speaker, Onay Chapman. While we cannot gather together in a banquet space as in the past, those days will come again. I hope you're enjoying your box meals and the chance to fellowship with your car mates. I suggest we pause for a moment, turn to the cars nearby, and wave to our neighbors. Hi guys, glad y'all are here. It is truly great to be here to enjoy COVID-friendly fellowship. I would be remiss if I did not acknowledge those who have made this event and the rest of the weekend possible. You will already have seen the names of Committee for King's generous sponsors on the screen, on our website, and in our media information. Our 2 platinum sponsors, Toyota Motor Manufacturing Mississippi and the City of Tupelo, lead the way in valuing the worth of every individual in our shared community. Gold, bronze, and church sponsors are the lifeblood of this weekend celebration and beyond. Thanks to each and every one of you for making Tupelo, Lee County, and Northeast Mississippi a welcoming place that celebrates the diverse gifts and talents that each of us bring to the community. In the sheets you were given as you entered, there is specific information regarding tonight's program, as well as the plans for the online program Sunday at 2:30 p.m. and the annual scholarship presentation and MLK Motorcade on Monday at 11 a.m., sponsored by the Modern Beauticians Club. I want to encourage you to be present for those events. They will be a blessing to you. Committee for King has evolved over these last few years, refreshing our programming, welcoming the Next Gen subcommittee, rebranding our organization, and working to be relevant and stay true to the spirit of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.'s work to resist the evils of poverty, racism, and militarism through nonviolent means. The online program tomorrow afternoon will be moderated by Vaughn Gordon, Youth Engagement Manager for the William Winter Institute for Racial Reconciliation, and will present a group of panelists discussing the impact of systemic racism on 4 topic areas: education, health and wellness, banking and finance, and criminal justice. The session is a kickoff introduction to a series of monthly online programs on the 3rd Sundays in February, March, April, and May that will delve deeper into each of those individual topics. These will be informative, interesting, challenging, occasionally provocative sessions. We invite community members from all walks of life to join us as we learn about systemic racism and ponder ways to break free from its pervasive grip. We must acknowledge and understand before we can improve. Finally, I want to invite each of you to consider ways that you can become involved in Committee for King and with other local organizations that work to impact the issues of poverty, racism, and militarism. Go to our website, committeeforking.org, for more information. Together, we can work to make dreams, both Dr. King's and ours, come true.
Hello, my name is Raquel Thompson. I'm the Hispanic minister of St. James Catholic Church. Today, I want to share with you the prayer of Christ needs you to love, reflecting on the life legacy of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. and the encyclical of Pope Francis, Fratelli Tutti, all brothers. In the Gospel of St. Luke, Jesus came first to the poor, to the shepherds in the fields. There was no place for him. From here comes to the posada tradition in the Hispanic community that means shelter. Each Advent, as we prepare for Christmas, we remember the life of Jesus. We remember the poor and the rejected like Joseph and Mary. Our own tradition inspiring us by remember Our Lady Guadalupe, who came to the poor man, Juan Diego, and announcing that God has sent her and a poor man like him, as well as the shepherds, and she made him a witness, and with her testimony, his testimony and faith and care to the more poor, announcing the hope that comes from her son Jesus. We also remember the example of the Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., who imagined that all people will be united in one. We belong in one beloved community, where all will be welcome and accepted. Let us ask ourselves how we preparing for the birth of Jesus today, as the history of his birth, in which there was no place for his parents, Joseph and Mary. It is possible that they can find a space in our lives and our communities, open for the poor or for the more people, the more poor people among us. As a Christians, our response to this pandemic should not be driven by fear, but by the love of the neighbor, and especially the most vulnerable among us. Christ needs you to love. Do not care about the race or the color of the skin. Love everyone like brothers and do good. To the one who suffers and the sad, to the humble and the poor, give it love. To the one who lives next to you, and to the ones who comes from afar, give it love. To the one that speaks another language, give it love. To the one that thinks different than you, give it love. To the friend that always, give it love. And to the one who doesn't greet you, give you love. Do not care about the race or the color of the skin. Love everyone like brothers and do good. Amén. Según el Evangelio de San Lucas, Jesús vino primero a los pobres, a los pastores en los campos. No había lugar para él. De aquí que nace la tradición de la posada en la comunidad hispana, que significa albergue. Cada Adviento, mientras nos preparamos para la Navidad, recordamos la vida de Jesús. Recordamos a los más pobres y a los más rechazados, como José y María. Como los pastores, la Virgen de Guadalupe aparece a un pobre indio, Juan Diego, y ella lo hizo testigo de su amor y cuidado a los más pequeños, anunciando la esperanza que viene de su Hijo Jesús. Así también recordamos el ejemplo del Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., quien imaginó que todas las personas estarían unidas en una sola comunidad amada, donde todos seríamos bienvenidos y aceptados. Nos preguntamos, en este tiempo que estamos viviendo, ¿cómo nos preparamos para el nacimiento de Jesús hoy? Como en la historia de su nacimiento no había lugar para José y María, ¿será que esta vez se encontrará un lugar de amor y fraternidad en nuestras vidas y en nuestras comunidades, abierto a los más pobres y a los más pequeños, a los más necesitados? Nuestra respuesta ante esta pandemia no debe de ser impulsada por el miedo, sino por el amor al prójimo y en especial a los más vulnerables entre nosotros. Entonces, en este espíritu pedimos a nuestras vidas de fe que crezcan en reconocer y dar la bienvenida a Jesús entre nosotros ahora. a los más pobres y a los más necesitados y a los que no tienen un lugar en la posada. Cristo te necesita para amar. No te importe la raza ni el color de la piel, ama a todos como hermanos y haz el bien. Al que sufre y al triste, al humilde y al pobre, dale amor. Y al que vive a tu lado, al que viene de lejos, dale amor. Al que habla otra lengua, dale amor. Al que piensa distinto que tú, dale amor. Al amigo de siempre y al que no te saluda, dale amor. No te importe la raza ni el color de la piel, ama a todos como hermanos y haz el bien.
I have the pleasure to present to you Dr. Martin Luther King, Jr.
I am happy to join with you today in what will go down in history as the greatest demonstration for freedom in the history of our nation. Five score years ago, a great American in whose symbolic shadow we stand today signed the Emancipation Proclamation. This momentous decree came as a great beacon light of hope to millions of Negro slaves who had been seared in the flames of withering injustice. It came as a joyous daybreak to end the long night of their captivity. But 100 years later, the Negro still is not free. 100 years later, the life of the Negro is still sadly crippled by the manacles of segregation and the chains of discrimination. 100 years later, the Negro lives on a lonely island of poverty in the midst of a vast ocean of material prosperity. 100 years later, the Negro is still languished in the corners of American society and finds himself in exile in his own land. So we've come here today to dramatize a shameful condition.
In a sense, we've come to our nation's capital to cash a check. When the architects of our republic wrote the magnificent words of the Constitution and the Declaration of Independence, they were signing a promissory note to which every American was to follow heir. This note was a promise that all men, yes, black men as well as white men, will be guaranteed the unalienable rights of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. It is obvious today that America has defaulted on this promissory note.
Insofar as her citizens of color are concerned, instead of honoring this sacred obligation, America has given the Negro people a bad check, a check which has come back marked insufficient funds. We have
also come to this hallowed spot
to remind America of the fierce urgency of now.
Now is the time to make real the promises of democracy. Now is the time to lift our nation from the quicksands of racial injustice to the solid rock of brotherhood. Now is the time to make justice a reality for all of God's children.
We conduct our struggle on the high plane of dignity and discipline. We must not allow our creative protests to degenerate into physical violence.
The marvelous new militancy, which has engulfed the Negro community, must not let us distrust all white people. For many of our white brothers, as evidenced by their presence here today, have come to realize that their destiny is tied up with our destiny.
They have come to realize that their freedom is inextricably bound to our freedom. We cannot walk alone. As we walk, we must make the pledge that we shall always march ahead. We cannot turn back. There are those who are asking the devotees of civil rights, when will you be satisfied? We can never be satisfied.
As long as our bodies, heavy with the fatigue of travel, cannot gain lodging in the motels
of the highways and the hotels of the city.
We cannot be satisfied as long as the Negro in Mississippi cannot vote and the Negro in New York believes he has nothing for which to vote.
No, we are not satisfied.
We will not be satisfied until justice rolls down like waters and righteousness like a mighty stream.
Say to you
today, my friends, even though we face the difficulties of today and tomorrow, I still have a dream. It is a dream deeply rooted in the
nation will rise up, live out the true meaning of its creed. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal.
All men are created equal. I have a dream that one day on the red hills of Georgia, the sons of former slaves and the sons of former slave owners will be able to sit down together at the table of brotherhood. I have a dream that one day, even the state of Mississippi, a state sweltering with the heat of injustice, sweltering with the heat of oppression, will be transformed into an oasis of freedom and justice. I have a dream that my 4 little children will one day live in a nation where they will not be judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character. I have a dream
that even down in Alabama with its vicious racists, with its governor having his lips dripping with the words of interposition and nullification, right there in Alabama, little black boys and black girls will one day join hands with little white boys and white girls as sisters and brothers.
This will be the day when all of God's children will be able to sing with new meaning, "My country 'tis of thee, sweet land of liberty, of thee I sing."
Land where my fathers died, land of the pilgrim's pride, from every mountainside let freedom ring. And if America is to be a great nation, this
must become true.
So let freedom ring from the prodigious hilltops of New Hampshire. Let freedom ring from the mighty mountains of New York. Let freedom ring from the heightening Alleghenies of Pennsylvania. Let freedom ring from the snow-capped Rockies of Colorado.
Let freedom ring from the snow-capped Rockies of Colorado. Let freedom ring from the curvaceous slopes of California. But not only that, let freedom ring from Stone Mountain of Georgia. Let freedom ring from Lookout Mountain of Tennessee. Let freedom ring from every hill and molehill of Mississippi, from every mountainside. Let freedom ring, and when this happens, when we allow freedom ring, when we let it ring from every village and every hamlet, from every state and every city.
When we allow freedom to ring, when we let it ring from every city and every hamlet, from every state and every city, we will be able to speed up the day when all of God's children,
Black and white,
Jews and Gentiles,
Protestants and Catholics, free at last, free at last.
Free at last.
Great God Almighty, we are free at last.
Free at last, free at last, great God Almighty, free at last.
Free at last, free at last. Thank God Almighty, we're free at last.
Sing it, buddy, sing it. It's been a long, sing, buddy. Long time coming. Yes, sir. I know change gonna come. Yeah.
I'd like to take a moment and introduce myself. My name is Rob Armstrong. I am the senior pastor of Harrisburg Baptist Church here in Tupelo, Mississippi, and I have been asked to speak on the importance of celebrating Martin Luther King Jr., on the importance of the day, the opportunity we have to remember. And at the end of the day, I found myself realizing it's not just about him, and I think we need to be reminded of that on a regular basis. We're not just remembering one man's legacy, we're remembering us. We're remembering who we are, where we've been, and what we are doing. You see, his memory is forever, I think, linked in our country to the effort to bring racial unity here, to equality for all people in our country. And as a 43-year-old who grew up in the state of Mississippi, I am often blown away at the fact that it was just 9 years before I was born that he was assassinated. That we've only had 9 presidents since the assassination of Martin Luther King Jr. This is still so fresh in our country and still so fresh in so many of our lives. You see, he said, one thing that stuck with me in just reading and learning more about his work and his ministry is that progress is often our enemy. That we will think as people that we have come far enough. And he said this, he said in his I Have a Dream speech, we've also come to this hallowed spot to remind America of the fierce urgency of now. This is no time to engage in the luxury of cooling off or to take the tranquilizing drug of gradualism. Now is the time to make real the promises of democracy. Now is the time to rise from the dark and desolate valley of segregation to the sunlit path of racial justice. Now is the time to lift our nation from the quicksands of racial injustice to the solid rock of brotherhood. Now is the time to make justice a reality for all of God's children. And year after year, celebrating his life, celebrating his work, reminds us of where we've come to, but also of the warning that he gave us. When it comes to injustice, we cannot embrace gradualism. Gradualism lures us into thinking that we have come far enough. And when it comes to injustice, there isn't an acceptable amount of injustice in the eyes of God. Psalm 11 verse 7 says, "The Lord is righteous and he loves justice." You see, the root of injustice is sin, and the sin of racism is an ever-present reality in our world. And because it is sin, we must follow Jesus' instruction in Matthew chapter 5, where he says, if your right eye causes you to sin, gouge it out and throw it away. For it's better that you lose one of the parts of your body than your whole body be thrown into hell. You see, we must recognize year after year when we celebrate this occasion that we can't live with injustice. And so the significance of this occasion comes to us year after year as we are reminded that racism is present. We can't ever turn our back on sin. Sin is always taking ground, and we must always be moving forward against it. Remembering and celebrating Dr. King encourages us that progress has been made and that progress can be made, that we must keep striving against injustice. He reminds us that the Lord does work, that the Lord does still change hearts, and the Lord does still work through us. Celebrating Martin Luther King helps us from being silent. It keeps us active. It keeps us talking. As Dr. King says, in the end, we will remember not the words of our enemies, but the silence of our friends. And I don't think this applies only to speaking against injustice, but also into celebrating what's happened in one another's lives. One of the most important parts of this occasion is that we come together to celebrate and to remember the victories that have been won. You see, we don't need to fall silent in speaking against injustice, nor do we need to grow cold to celebrating the victories over oppression. Celebrating and remembering helps us to see how far we've come while at the same time looking ahead at what we still have left to do. I believe this is one of the greatest benefits of any celebration. Dr. King said, "I have a dream that one day even the state of Mississippi, a state that will be transformed into an oasis of freedom and justice. I have a dream that my 4 little children will one day live in a nation where they will not be judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character." As a fellow Mississippian, I too look forward to the days in our state and our country where we will look at one another as children made in the image of God. I look forward to a day where we see one another and embrace one another in the glorious tapestry of color that God has given each one of us. And I look forward to a day where we judge one another on who God says we are. You see, celebrating Martin Luther King Jr., celebrating today helps every one of us to stay grounded in the American dream of equality and justice for all. Remembering keeps us moving forward. Martin Luther King said, "If you can't fly, then run. If you can't run, then walk. And if you can't walk, then crawl. But whatever you do, you have to keep moving forward." And remembering today, celebrating Martin Luther King Jr. and his life's work keeps us moving forward.
I'm Shawn Brevard, Chairperson of Committee for King. Each year, the Committee for King lifts up an individual or organization that through consistent volunteer service exemplifies love, compassion, respect, and racial harmony towards his or her fellow men and women. Oftentimes, nominators look for those individuals or groups who fly under the radar, doing good work for its own sake, not for any recognition or sense of personal ego. This year's award recipient, Mr. Boyd Yarbrough, is just such a person. Boyd has worked for decades in the trenches all over Tupelo, helping to keep our city looking good for residents and visitors alike as director of the City of Tupelo Beautification Department. On his own time, Boyd has spent 36 years providing support and hard work at the Orrin-Dunn City Museum, preserving this community's history for all ages. Boyd has personally built multiple displays in the museum, including the popular model train set. He has given not just his talent, but his resources, donating materials for the displays. He is constantly gathering more stories about the town and its history, and delights in sharing in great detail many of these stories. He is a walking encyclopedia and devotes hours to research at the Lee County Library. Boyd truly loves this town and wants the best quality of life for all of its citizens. As current president of the museum's board, Boyd has supported the deliberate effort to be more inclusive of all of Tupelo's history, including the overlooked stories of the African American community. As one person wrote in support of his nomination, quote, "Boyd is a quiet, humble man with a huge heart and a desire to see Tupelo the best it can be for its citizens. He is most deserving to be recognized by the Committee for King MLK Community Service Award." We agree. It is a delight to invite Boyd Yarbrough to the podium to receive the 2021 MLK Community Service Award and offer any remarks that he would like upon this recognition. Good. Congratulations.
So,
You're so pleased.
I really am.
And we'll let you step up.
Gee whiz, this is such an honor. These few words I had, really, I don't know that they mean what I want to convey, but, you know, this recognition, let me take this off. This recognition emphasizes Dr. King's words and actions fully. There's so many other community service folks that have spent so much time just giving selflessly to the community. I'm just honored. But Dr. King did give us a fine example to live by. You know, treat one another as we would ourselves and to follow the golden rule. But, you know, after 66 years, I still have problems with empathy for our fellow citizens, you know, but I do try to treat everybody with respect and dignity, no matter what their station in life. And, you know, I have had opportunity to live in other communities, but there is no better place than Tupelo to live. And I think it all goes back, you know, to that Tupelo spirit. And that Tupelo spirit is the reason why I have such a passion for history of Tupelo. I want to share Tupelo's history with everybody. And this award recognition really it means so much because it's a hobby. I love doing it, and thank you all for recognizing me for what I love to do. Thank you so much. But you know, our history cannot be complete without including everyone, white, black, Protestant, Jewish, and others. So that's why I want to invite everyone to become associated or help with the Dunn City Museum in helping to preserve and to pass along that history of that rich history of our community. You know, it may be cliche, but you don't know where you're going unless you know where you've been. And it's our job to help develop leadership for the next generation to sustain that Tupelo spirit. So thank you so very much for this award for me and for my whole family. Thank you so much. Whoops.
My name is Pastor Charles Princeton, and it was my honor to nominate and today to present the Committee for King 2021 Image Award, given in recognition to an outstanding group or individual whose artistic contributions to our community have positively impacted the quality of life. This individual, like Dr. King, had a dream that he could use his God-given talent, and I quote, to paint my people in a positive light, end quote. Our recipient is a native son of Tupelo who attended George Washington Carver High School, who picked up a paintbrush in 1976, and for the past 44 years has shared his artistic creations with us. He sold his first piece to community librarian Mrs. Lily Vaughn in 1976 and was encouraged by the thought that someone valued his work, and he has been painting ever since. His first exhibition was a part of a presentation of local black artists that he gathered together to show their work at the C.C. Augustus Center on North Green Street here in Tupelo. Since then, he has participated in the Gum Tree Festival, exhibitions in Car Rent, Holly Springs, and at Tupelo Reed's bookstore. He's even received a key to the city of Tupelo. His art can be viewed and purchased online at fineartsamerica.com. Ladies and gentlemen, I present the 2021 Committee for King Image Award to Tupelo's very own Billy Clifton.
Yes, I just want to say that I cannot thank God enough for blessing me with this gift and having enough sense to run with it. And I don't want to thank the King Committee for this award. Thank you.
First, let me say thank you to the Committee for King for this great opportunity of presenting on this great man, this great scholar, that I truly admire. Thank you again for this opportunity. For tonight, we want to talk about keeping the dream alive. Keeping the dream alive. Texas A&M Center of Medicine recently did a study in which they concluded that dreams occur in the areas of our brains most responsible for the higher functioning extremities in our minds, which means things like language are in high functioning mode while we're dreaming. They report that dreams are complex, allowing the experiences to actually feel and seem real. But the most interesting things about dreams is that they reflect fragments of your memory and your experience. In essence, this means that the only thing that keeps dreams alive is the continuation of experiences that reflect our collective memories, which means we have the grand opportunity to take dreams and make them reality if we're intentional on doing so. In his book entitled Strength to Love, Dr. Martin Luther King is quoted as saying, "One of the most agonizing problems within our human experience is that few, if any of us, live to see our fondest hopes fulfilled." He goes on to say the hopes of our childhood and the promises of our mature years are unfinished symphonies. If Dr. King was correct, and I certainly believe he was, it stands to reason that much of what we do in our everyday lives is for future generations. This concept is not popular in a society that prides itself on individualistic goals, achievements, and attainments. We live in a social media age that centers everything around how we look, our net worth, and abilities to build followers and fans. So the question becomes, how do we keep the dream alive in such a world? A world torn by pandemics, rampant racism, civil unrest, and inequality abounding. Many of the same issues Dr. King faced in 1963 when he gave his March on Washington speech. The interesting thing about this speech is that it included all Americans. As he said, "I have a dream." Deep down, he knew he would never see his dreams come to fruition, but he refused to dream small and mundane. He understood the complexity of the racial divide threatening the true democracy of what America said on paper. To many, this sounds like a lofty goal, the fact that every citizen, every company, every religious organization, every civic organization should be in the continual fight of creating and assuring a country that works for everybody and not just some. Isn't that the crux of what the dream speech was all about? Figuring out the complex nuances of the hurdles and roadblocks facing the most powerful nation on earth? This noble idea that no one gets to escape the work needed to close the divides and build bridges over rivers of contempt. In his sermon entitled "The Man Who Was a Fool," Dr. King posits all men are caught in an inescapable network of mutuality, tied into a single garment of destiny. Whatever affects one directly affects all indirectly. I can never be what I ought to be until you are what you ought to be. And you can never be what you ought to be until I am what I ought to be. The merger of theology and social change proved to be the catalyst for this message of transformation. At only the tender age of 26, King was leading national movements, demonstrations, and boycotts in Montgomery, which raises the critical question: are you ever too young to make contributions to the empowerment and betterment of the society in which you live? If we are to keep the dream alive, it will take all hands on deck, young, old, and middle-aged alike. The dividing lines of affiliations have to take a back seat to the critical work of ecumenical determination and cooperation. Keeping the dream alive is about planting trees you'll never receive shade from, but understanding that you're planting trees for your future generations so that they can sit under those very trees. It means creating a world in which winners and losers are not determined by which side of the tracks you live on. A world that refuses to accept inequality carried out on even one individual. Many people talk about the dream, all the while participating in public policies that create nightmares for others. Keeping the dream alive means more than reconciliation meetings and prayer. It means creating equality in resources and funding, creating opportunities for those that have been pushed to the margins of society, and exposing any corruption that would seek to marginalize the least, the left out, and the forgotten. It was that brilliant writer and scholar James Baldwin that said, "Love takes off masks that we fear we cannot live without, and know we cannot live within." Keeping the dream alive means removing the mask of pretentious complexities and replacing them with problem-solving realities. How do we begin to solve these pressing problems that serve to further divide us? Albert Einstein is quoted as saying, "We cannot solve our problems with the same thinking we use to create them." This simply means at some point the solution has to gain more exposure than the darkness of the divide, understanding that most problems require maturity to outgrow them. This is evident in the fact that the last week of Dr. King's life was spent fighting for sanitation workers in Memphis, Tennessee. King believed that the struggle in Memphis exposed the need for economic equality and social justice that he hoped his Poor People's Campaign would highlight nationally. Here he was again, fighting for the marginalized. I want to warn you that many times when you're seeking to keep the dream alive, you won't be well liked. Truth tellers are hardly ever celebrated, if at all. And contrary to popular belief, when Dr. King died, he was not the beloved figure that he is today. In August 1966, less than 2 years before his death, a Gallup poll revealed that over 63% of Americans had an unfavorable opinion of King. Truth tellers are never popular, but it's our job to raise the banner of truth and transparency. One of my favorite speakers, Dr. Eric Thomas, tells a story of a boy that wanted to achieve greatness in life. This boy said, "I want to be great. I want to really be something great in my life." And so he says, "How can I become great?" So the people in the town tell him, "There's an old man that we call the guru. He lives down a few blocks from here. He never comes out much. He never socializes, but he has the keys to greatness." And they say, "If you want to be great, go down and see the guru, and he can tell you how to be great." So the boy goes down and he knocks on the man's door. An old man comes to the door with white hair, and he comes in, and the boy says, "Guru, I heard that you are the man I need to see. You are the man that can help me in my quest to be great." He says, "How do I become great?" The guru tells him, "Son, meet me tomorrow morning on the beach." And the boy says, "Meet you on the beach? But I came here so you can tell me and teach me about greatness." He says, "Son, just do as I'm telling you to do." He says, "Meet me at the beach at 6 in the morning." The boy says, 6 in the morning? He says, "Yes, meet me at 6 in the morning." By the time the boy gets there at 6 a.m., the boy shows up in a 3-piece suit, but the guru has on shorts and a t-shirt. And the boy says, "Hold on, I have on a 3-piece suit. You have on shorts and a t-shirt. What is this all about?" The guru says, "Come out in the water." The boy says, "But I have on a 3-piece suit." He says, "Come out into the water. I want to show you a valuable lesson." The boy gets out in the water, and as he gets in the water, the guru instantly grabs him and places him under the water. And he holds the boy under the water just until he's about to pass out. But before the boy can pass out, he brings him out of the water. And the guru looks at the boy and he asks him one simple question. He says, "When you were under the water," he says, "what was your first thought?" The boy says, "I simply wanted to breathe." The guru says, "Son, you have your answer. If you want to be great in life, you have to want it as bad as you want to breathe. He says that is your critical answer for success. You have to want it as bad as you want to breathe. When you want to keep the dream alive as bad as you want to breathe, that's when you'll do it. The guru in the story understood that some lessons are only learned in the deep trenches of discovery. As we reflect on this day, what can you do to keep the dream alive? The dream that people are not judged by skin color, economic level, or religious affiliation. Dr. King was calling upon us to examine our places of privilege, even in our houses of worship. Recently, we've seen church organizations refuse to allow the teaching of critical equality education, neglecting those of goodwill the opportunity to examine the importance of learning about other groups, cultures, and backgrounds. I still believe that the Creator made each of us important, noteworthy, and special. We all have unique abilities, even down to our very fingerprints. That small matter of DNA that's unique to only us. The indication that we were all created to touch the world differently and in our own way. It takes courage to dream bigger than our surroundings. It takes extreme boldness to stand in the face of opposition and use your voice for change. That great scholar and mystic, Dr. Howard Thurman, says, don't ask what the world needs. Ask what makes you come alive and go do it. Because what the world needs is more people who have come alive. Dreams are necessary, but are you willing to become alive to cause dreams to become your reality? Are you willing to become alive and fight injustice, the kind that continues to rip the country apart at its very seams? The world needs more people that have come alive, in the words of Howard Thurman. It's time to come alive. The I Have a Dream speech was only 16 minutes long, but the impact will last a lifetime. Can't you hear the sound of clarity and conviction as he says, we refuse to believe that the bank of justice is bankrupt. We refuse to believe that there are insufficient funds in the great vaults of opportunity of this nation. So we've come to cash this check, a check that would give us the riches of freedom and the security of justice. In order to keep the dream alive, everyone needs access to the key that opens the door to opportunity. The fulfillment that I desire for my own house, I should also desire for your house. Leave the door open for those coming behind you. As a courtesy to future generations, leave the light on. Every time we solve racial animosity, we open the door for dialogue and healthy problem solving. Every time we sit down and reason together, we shatter glass ceilings of contempt and closed-circuited conversation. Always remembering that the ultimate goal is to keep planting trees you may never receive shade from, but plant them anyway. As I inch toward the close of this address, I want to issue a challenge that I hope we all accept. That challenge is simply this: seek to change your corner of the world. You may not be rich or famous, but somebody looks up to you. Having a measure of order and efficiency is not just reserved for a chosen few. It is available to anyone who is willing to accept change and a fresh perspective. Too often we settle for the way things have been. We replay failed attempts and mistakenly assume that future attempts will automatically be the same. That simply isn't fair, nor is it true. Change your corner of the world. Give more, love more, laugh more, respect others more. Change your corner of the world. Dr. Miles Monroe says the richest place on earth is the graveyard. Simply because so many of us go to the grave with unfulfilled dreams, talents, gifts, and treasures that we never capitalized on while we were alive. Keeping the dream alive means refusing to take your most prized possession, your ability to influence change, to the grave. As I close, reminded of a story of a little lady by the name of Osceola McCarty. Osceola McCarty lived there in Hattiesburg, Mississippi. All of her life, she had been just a washerwoman. She would wash a sheet for 10 cents, wash someone's pants for 5 cents, wash a blouse for 25 cents. And she had made her entire living from just washing other people's clothes. By the time she reached 80-something years of age, she received a call from the president of her local bank. He says, "Miss McCarty, I have something I want to tell you." He says, "You have amassed a great amount of money here at my bank. And I want you to come down and let us know that in case of your untimely demise, what you want to do with this large sum of money." She says, "How much money is it?" He says, "You've amassed about $250,000. She says, "What? I cannot believe that." But she goes down to the bank and they get there and he says, "Miss McCarty, here's what we're going to do." He says, "I'm going to place a dime on the table." And he says, "Every dime represents your money going to a different place or space." He says, "Just let me know where you want your funds to go." She says, "Well, I have a nephew and a niece that I would like to give money to." He says, "Okay, I'll give money to them." She says, "I have a great church, a great pastor that I really love and enjoy. I want to give money to that organization." He says, "Okay, I'll give money to that organization." And she says, "I want you to take the remaining funds and give to the University of Southern Miss." He says, "Give this money." She says, "Give this money to Southern Mississippi." He says, "A university that you could not even attend because of the color of your skin?" She says, "Yes." She says, "I want to give my money, but under one stipulation." She says, "I want you to give my money to a student that still has the capacity to dream." She says, "Give my money to a student that still has the capacity to dream." By the time this hit the news, this went all over America. Even Ted Turner matched her funds. And she received a call from then President Bill Clinton, who invited her up to the White House. She had never been on a plane in her life. She actually took a train from Mississippi all the way up to D.C. It was the first time she had ever stayed in a hotel room, but when she woke up that morning, she made up the bed before she left. And she received this great award for being this woman that gave all she had to the service of others. When she got back home, they done a special on her and they asked her, "Is there anything that you would like to say about your great generosity?" And she says, "I just want to see the student that received my funds graduate and walk across the stage." Just 4 months later, she would see the first student walk across the stage that had received her great generosity. And less than 60 days later, she made a transition. But she had a chance to see a student that had the capacity to dream. And I leave you with that challenge. Keep your capacity to dream, understanding that you're always planting shade trees that you may never have an opportunity to sit under, but plant them anyway, understanding that your future generations will one day sit under those shade trees. I leave you with this, my friend. Keep the dream alive. Thank you and God bless you.
Good evening. Thank you for joining us. My name is Charles Moore. I'm the president-elect of the Lee County chapter of the NAACP. I have the distinct honor of presenting this Drum Major Award to a great friend of mine. Since 1993, the Committee for King has recognized leaders who, like Dr. Martin Luther King, not only in their conversation but also in their work ethics, have exemplified the work that Dr. King started. This day and time, we need leaders such as this to continue to come forth and evolve into their own very own. Why? Because it transforms not only our society but the very lifestyle that we live. And this time, before I make the announcement of who he is, I want to tell you some of his accolades. He currently serves as the pastor of Beckley Chapel CME Church in Boonville, Mississippi. He is an ordained elder in the CME Church. He serves as a special assistant to the presiding elder of QH Whitlock. He is the president of the Get Out to Vote Coalition a member of the NAACP, a Kingdom Broadcasting Network partner, Habitat for Humanity, Association for Excellence in Education, Lee County AARP, Lee County Democratic Executive Committee, indivisible of Northeast Mississippi's Sanctuary Hospice board member, and original member of the Committee for Kings, serving as past president and now the executive director. He is a former Rotarian and Paul Harris Fellow, and he has served as a board member of the Black Business Association, United Way, North Mississippi Health Services Development Foundation, and the Commission of the Future of Northeast Mississippi. In 1980, he was appointed by Governor William Winter to the Mississippi Health Care Commission. He is a 1970 graduate of George Washington Carver High School, earning the Star Student Award, and served as student body president. He is a Vietnam-era veteran, having served 3 years in the U.S. Army. He attended Mississippi State University and earned a BA in Political Science, 1977, and a master's degree in Public Administration, 1978. He completed the Master of Divinity program at Memphis Theological Seminary, graduating cum laude. In May of 2005, he is a certified senior professional in human resources and COVID leadership training. And his professional work history includes HR Director for the City of Tupelo, the first HR Director of the City of Tupelo from 1980 to 1987. He was a general manager of the radio station WACR AM/FM out of Columbus, Mississippi from 1987 to 1990. He was employed by Journal Publishing Company as production manager and later HR director in 1990 until the retirement in 2001. He was the owner and operator of Kid Company Child Care and Learning Center. Not to mention, there are more and more accolades that he has done and more great things that he's done for our community, our world, our nation, and our city. I'm pleased to present none other than our very own Drum Major Award to our very own Charles Spencer. Thank you, Pastor Moore. I'd like to, first of all, thank God. Thank my wife, Reverend Dr. Cheryl Penson, of 43 years, and our family, and of course the Committee for King for this great honor. It's an honor to be listed among the great heroes of our time. Heroes like Dr. Aaron Henry, Mr. Jack Reed Sr., Alderman Boyce Grayson, and my mentor, Reverend Robert Jameson. My life has been shaped by the marches of the 60s and the leadership of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Since organizing the Carver student body for a community meeting on school integration, my path has been one of championing justice. In 1980, I moved back to Tupelo to accept the position of personnel director with a charge to increase minority employment to reflect local demographics. I was a plaintiff in the suit against the city structure which diluted black voting strength. The suit resulted in the change of the number of elected officials in the city of Tupelo from 10 to 7 and the creation of a second majority black ward. One of the efforts I am most proud of is the Get Out the Vote Coalition. That over the years we have worked hard to register hundreds of voters, from young high schoolers to senior citizens. I would like to finally thank the congregations I have pastored over the years for supporting my endeavors. Throughout my life, I have kept uppermost in my ministry the question, what does God require of humankind? And the answer, to act justly, to love mercy, and to walk humbly with my God. Thank you.
At this time, I would like to take a few moments to present an award of appreciation to tonight's keynote speaker, Mr. One Chapman, for his outstanding presentation for the Martin Luther King celebration on tonight. Mr. Chapman is a renowned motivational speaker. I have had the experience of working with him for several years. He is the author of 21 books. He is local. He lives in the Shannon community. He went to college in Atlanta, Georgia. If you have not had the opportunity to ask Mr. Chapman to present at any of your events, or even to come in and do a company-based educational presentation, or to enter into your school system, you are really missing out. Mr. Chapman comes in with the skills, he comes in with the knowledge and the expertise to make a difference in the community. So it was such an honor to be able to have him here tonight as our speaker. Mr. One Chapman, we thank you.
Thank you, Sister Ashley, for this great honor, and to the Committee for King for awarding me with this great plaque. This is such an honor, especially being a person that went to the same school that Dr. King went to. This is a double honor for me, and I thank you guys so much for inviting me to give words of wisdom and words of knowledge on this great scholar. Thank you.
Good evening. On behalf of the Committee for Martin Luther King, I would like to thank everyone for attending our drive-in presentation. To the board, thank you for planning such an awesome program. Thanks to all the program participants. Each of you added so much value to the program. Again, we would like to thank our sponsors. You make the event, such as this one, flow seamlessly. Thank you to our speaker, One Chapman, who always does an awesome job with delivering the message, and we will keep the dream alive. I hope everyone has a wonderful night, and thank you again.